Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Broad Art Tell Me More Summer Reads. We have four wonderful authors here today that have some really fun books. We have a little romance. We have a little bit of history. We have some Southern folk cooking and family, and I'm really excited to be talking about the Townsend family recipe for disaster. This is a book club hook and perfect beach read about the Southern edge that explores themes of family, food, and belongings. And Shauna, this is your third book, so over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to talk about my book with you all. I'm Shauna Robinson. This is my third book, as mentioned. I'm an author based in Richmond, Virginia, as of last year. I moved here from Northern Virginia, so not a super big move. My third novel, The Townsend Family Recipe for Disaster, is a women's fiction novel. It's about a woman named May who is on the verge of getting married. And as her wedding's quickly approaching, her in-laws are super into the wedding planning. They are planning the world's most elaborate wedding, 12-piece orchestras, 4 chocolate fountains, nothing is off limits. And May, meanwhile, is thinking more about family and who's coming to the wedding, because May has always grown up not really knowing the Black side of her family. She's half Black, half white. She grew up among mostly her white in-laws, and the only Black relative she knew was her dad, who died when she was young. So for May, family kind of means being an outsider, feeling like she's left out. And now she's on the verge of marrying into a white family and being like, oh, well, I'm repeating history here. And I sure would love to get to know my Black relatives and really bring us all together, because there's some sort of mysterious divide that I don't know anything about. And maybe my wedding can be the thing that brings us all together. So our sweet May sends invitations to all her Black relatives who are in North Carolina, who she doesn't really know, and figures, they'll come to the wedding and they'll meet me and love me and it'll be great. Only to quickly find, as the wedding approaches sooner, that no one has RSVP'd. And then 3 weeks before the wedding, she sees on social media that her paternal grandmother has died. And May decides that a good way to meet her family might be crashing the funeral and forcing them to love her. And so her hope is that by going to the funeral, she'll actually get to connect with her family and get to know them and put whatever weirdness is in the past. Um, and so she arrives, but she quickly discovers that there's maybe a lot more to this mysterious family rift that she realized. She gets there and introduces herself, but everyone is kind of either frosty to her, or they don't know what to say around her and they can't wait to leave, or it's just very awkward. And so she soon kind of realizes a few things. Like, one, whatever's keeping my family divided, there are some secrets here that I need to uncover. Two, um, her grandmother's famous mac and cheese recipe is something that no one can find, and everyone's really sad about it because the grandmother was really the matriarch of the family, and she keeps hearing all these stories about her grandmother's love of cooking, and everyone feels kind of incomplete without this recipe. And so then May feels determined to find or figure out the recipe, and maybe win her family's love that way. And also, since her grandmother was the one that was bringing everyone together through like barbecues and parties and events and celebrations, May realizes that everyone is kind of sad that the upcoming 4th of July, which wouldn't normally would have been a big barbecue her grandmother threw, was kind of going to pass unnoticed. And so May sees this as an opening to kind of take on this duty herself and bring the family together by throwing the 4th of July barbecue. And so her plan is to kind of stay in North Carolina a little bit longer than she anticipated, to figure out those family secrets, crack that mac and cheese recipe, and throw a barbecue that will hopefully be an occasion to remember for good reasons for her family, all while trying to make it back home in time for her wedding, which is very quickly approaching. And for some inspiration on the story behind the book. So I myself am half Black, half white. I grew up kind of disconnected from extended family on either side. My mother's side is in Australia, and my dad's side is in Louisiana. And so it was really just my immediate family, just my parents and my siblings growing up in Southern California. And so about 10 years ago, my dad just kind of mentioned, kind of casually, like, oh, I'm going to be flying to Louisiana for my mother's funeral. Would you like to come? And that was kind of a surprise to me because, and I didn't know how to say this in the moment, like, but I didn't know she had been alive just because my family didn't really, I don't know, it just wasn't something that was really talked about much, the extended family. And so I was like tempted to go because it would be an opportunity to get to meet my family and get to know them. But on the other hand, a funeral isn't really the best vehicle for doing that, given that, you know, they would be grieving and would be distracted. And so I ultimately decided not to go, but it always kind of stuck with me, that idea of, you know, someone showing up at a funeral just completely oblivious to the situation, hoping for love and acceptance, and not realizing what kind of other family secrets and situations that she might have stepped into. And something else that kind of surprised me as I was writing this book was that in the initial draft, some feedback that I had gotten was, oh, well, so what's the reason that May's never known her extended family? And I was just kind of like, geography? I don't know. That was always my assumption. And so turns out that that's not a good enough reason to not know your family. So that's why I added family secrets and other things. And so as far as I know, there are no family secrets, but when this book comes out, my family will like tell me things and I'll finally be in the know if there are things I don't know. Um, but just to kind of sum up some key themes in the book are, of course, family, like belonging and what that means, and food and the role that plays in family. Like I think it's something that a lot of people can relate with, is the fact that there are certain dishes or recipes that are really important to, you know, who your family is. And without those recipes, you can feel kind of lost. And so Maid's grandmother is the kind of person she discovers in the book, who, when people would ask for recipes, would just say, oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And everyone would be like, well, that's not helpful. My mother is the same way, as I know from trying to chase after her for recipes. So yeah, food and family, I think, very intricately linked. And I love food, so there's that. So anyway, that is the book in a nutshell. And thank you for your time.
So this is your third book. So is your writing process that other ideas were coming about and this was actually building within you? Or was this something that when you first started writing was going to be coming out sooner? How did you end up with this as your third book?
Well, so like I had this idea for like a while, but I was kind of scared of it, because it's like writing about something that I myself haven't explored. It's just like that, you know, I have this like desire to, it would be great to know my family, but I don't really. And so how can I write a book about something that I don't know? And so I definitely explored some other ideas. And then when I was tossing around ideas for my third book with my agent, I like sent her a couple, and one was like super fleshed out, and then the other one was like, oh, and then like a family book or something, I don't know, like crashing a funeral mac and cheese recipe, whatever. And then hoping she would go for the first one, and then my agent was like, oh, I really like this second one. I was like, oh no. So I was a little afraid of it at first, but I'm glad I finally wrote it.
I like the way you built the relationship with Connor and May. And the beginning is really funny when it starts out that they're with his parents and she's been drinking too much because they've been tasting wine and she's really trying to, you know, stay composed. yet she's losing it. And then you kind of get to know that character, and there's some humor to it. Very sweet.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I love writing humor, so that was a delight.
Yes, it was very enjoyable. So our next book is Love in Tandem. This book is a fake dating romantic comedy. It's timeless opposites attract, clean romance, and also a great book for book clubs. And I have to say that Becca has a great sense of humor. So Becca, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Becca Kinzer. Love in Tandem is my second novel, and it just came out yesterday. So I'm just kind of walking around the house, like hugging the book still in that stage. A little bit about how I got into writing because there's still times I'm like, how do I have two books published? How did I get here? I credit my Aunt Linda. She gave me my very first journal for Christmas when I was in second grade, and I immediately started writing in it. And then I immediately wanted everybody to read what I had written because, of course, it was amazing. So I grew up always writing in journals, and always I never wrote journals that were under lock and key. I would give them to my brothers and be like, read this out loud because I wanted to see if it made them laugh. So I've always enjoyed writing and trying to make people laugh with what I write. And growing up, I thought I'd pick a career that had to do with writing, but I, at the time, thought that would probably be writing for like a newspaper or a magazine. And I had an epiphany in high school that I don't like reading newspapers or magazines. I like to just write for fun. And I was afraid if I chose a career where I had to write, I'd lose that joy of writing. So I chose my other interest, which was nursing. And I blame a 1980s television miniseries for that decision. As much as I love being a nurse, I grew up watching The Blue and the Gray. It was this, like, yeah, it was a three-part, series. And there's a nurse in there that she ends up marrying the hero. And I was just like, oh, the life of a nurse must be very romantic. I'm doing this. It's not quite as romantic as I expected, but it's been a great career. And I was happy along with that and still writing in my journals. And then I had my second epiphany that I'm not going to live forever. And that's a tough epiphany to have when you're like, oh man, someday I'm going to die. And I had one of those, if I were on my deathbed today, one of my biggest regrets, this was back around 2016, was that I never wrote a book. Like I never wrote a story. That was something I've always wanted to do. And so that was the year where I'd say my publishing journey kind of kicked off. And I started writing, and of course, the first story was terrible, but I made everybody read it anyway in my family because that's what I do. And they were like, yeah, this is terrible. So I studied the craft of writing and started joining writers' groups. And then it was 2019 when I had entered a contest for unpublished writers, and that's my ended up being my debut novel. I gave it the title Dear Henry Love Edith, and in 2019 it ended up winning a contest, and that was how I caught the attention of an agent. And it also, I was trying to initially, I didn't know if I wanted to write romantic suspense or romantic comedy, and that kind of told me you need to do comedy. Forget the suspense. You're not very good at that. I was like, okay. So it helped me find my lane, and that's the lane I've stayed in, is writing rom-com. And so my debut came out last year, and then, like I said, yesterday, Love in Tandem came out. So as far as the inspiration for stories, I love when just a real life situation amuses me, something, a scenario that I've been in, and it kind of sparks, how can I make an entire story about this? So Love in Tandem, the obvious inspiration, since it's about a couple doing a tandem bike ride, was that my husband and I, before we were married, we went on a bike trip, the almost the exact same trip that they take. It's down the Natchez Trace. We rode 500 miles, and we had joked like, well, this is going to be the make it or break it of our relationship. And it was the make it because that was in the summer of 2010, and then we were married by December of 2010. So I always knew that trip was like a big part of my marriage, and then here we are 14 years later, and it turned out to be kind of the inspiration for this whole story. But what actually sparked the original seed for this story was a situation I had as a nurse. Um, I've I've worked in burn unit, trauma unit, surgical, and you meet a lot of people in a lot of scenarios. And this was when I was working on our unit was a trauma unit, and I had a patient who I think he'd been in a car accident. It's been a while back, and honestly, I don't remember. But so he needed to be in the ICU, but he wasn't like super critical. It was just one of those, we got to watch you for a few days and make sure you're okay. And this was before everybody had smartphones. And he told me when he knew he was going to have to be stuck there for a few days, he was like, "Hey, can you do me a big favor? It's kind of a weird favor, but I was supposed to be meeting this old high school friend. We've been exchanging emails and we're meeting up for dinner this certain night. I need to get a hold of her and tell her I won't be there." And of course, I'm like, this is the love of his life. Like, I cannot let her go to this restaurant and her wonder where he is. You know, they need to name their baby after me someday because I'm going to save this relationship. They may have just been friends. I don't know. But like, yes, yes, what do I need to do? So he gave me his email and login. I was like, just email her, tell her I'm fine, but I'm not going to be there. So I did. And it was the most fun I've had as a nurse. I was like, this is way better than hanging medications any day, but yes, let me email her. So anyway, that happened. You know, everything was fine. But years later, as I was trying to like, what's a good rom-com scenario that I can start with? I thought back to that and was like, what if, you know, similar scenario, but he doesn't have her email. He can't get a hold of her at all. The only thing he knows is like someone's going to be at this restaurant, and you've got this nurse who says, "I'll go to the restaurant for you, I'll relay the message." And then, of course, the writing part is like, but what can go wrong? Like, what if this happens? What if, you know, she runs into someone from her past that she doesn't expect to see? Or what if she gives the message to the wrong person? Or what? And it just kind of went from there. So that was actually where Love in Tandem started, that scenario, which you see at the beginning of the story. And then eventually I'm like, now what do I do with this couple? And then that was when I thought, I know, I'll put them on a tandem bike. And I was able to use my old journal entries and things about our trip to kind of help guide me a little bit with what was going to happen on their trip. And then I think because I'm a nurse and you can only have so much fun as a nurse, rom-com has been my outlet to just really have fun. Sometimes my editors are like, we got to rein it back in a little bit. That's maybe a little too over the top. I'm like, okay. But there's a lot of the zany humor and banter, and it's when I start to get stressed out, I remind myself, Becca, this is your fun job. Like, just have fun with the story. And so that's Love in Tandem. It's just a fun story that I hope makes people laugh and I hope they enjoy.
It really is funny. I mean, when the Melba cook and she goes and tells the wrong person that this won't tell what happens to her, but it is so funny. And then how the two meet up and why they're there and the restaurant. It's very, very entertaining. Very creative too. A lot of twists within that, even in the first few chapters, a lot of different twists. So you were inspired by your tandem ride with your husband. What is your writing process? Do you do like a storyboard, or do you just sit and the ideas come to you, and then your editor kind of says, well, let's move this way and maybe add something here? Is that more how you write?
I'd say it's an evolving process because initially, you know, before you have a contract, it's like I had all the time in the world to just play and do what I want with the story. So I was much more of a pantser. Now it's like I might need to do a little more plotting because I do tend to write a lot of drafts because it takes me a while to figure out the story. I mean, when I was writing this, it was all pantsing, and so that's some of my chapters were like, you know, I'd go from chapter 20 to chapter stupid, chapter I don't know what's going on here, chapter figure this out later, and then later it's like, well, now I got to figure this out. So no, I'm not one that has the storyboards or a lot of the things. It's more I just keep telling the story, going through draft until I it just kind of smooths out, and then I I mean, sometimes I have to like rewrite the synopsis again of what exactly is this story about, and eventually get there. So I'm trying to do some different strategies so that it's not quite as time consuming, but it's also sometimes that's part of the fun of not knowing where the story's going to go and surprising yourself, which this one did a few times near the end.
Nice, very nice. Thank you. So our next book is of Love and Treason. This is it's for readers of historical and biblical fiction, including fans of Voice in the Wind. It starts or takes place in Rome, AD 270, and Jamie Mogul is the author. Jamie, over to you.
Yes, well, I'm Jamie Ogle. Of Love and Treason is my debut novel with Tyndale, and it tells the legendary love story of Saint Valentine and what happens to him. So I've been writing, and I feel like ever since I could put sounds and pictures together into something. And I was always surrounded by stories. My grandparents loved to tell stories about their lives, and I kind of fell in love with history, listening to them tell stories about their lives, and kind of loved the stories of just overcoming and perseverance and grit. I studied English and creative writing and minored in history when I was in college, and with the goal of being a writer. I mean, I started like maybe I should do like a real job, like elementary education or something. And I tried that and I was like, oh man, that's not for me. So to all the teachers out there, thank you. But so yeah, I changed my major to writing and just really kind of pursued that ever since. And it's been a while. So this story kind of came from me being sour about Valentine's Day and like, this is so stupid. And what is this even about? And why do I need to spend money to show somebody I love them? And I was just grouchy. And so I was like, well, I should probably just figure out what this is even about before I go spouting my opinions everywhere. So I Googled it, did a search, and was like, oh, well, this story is pretty cool. Where's the book? Where's the movie? Like this is a great story. And I couldn't find one, and it just stuck in my head. And all of a sudden I was seeing scenes of this story and characters were having conversations, and I started writing them down because what else am I gonna do? And pretty soon I had this massive first draft that was like 2.5 books long. And I finished it and I was like, well, this is a complete story. I should definitely right now try to find an agent. And I went to my first writers conference and I tried to pitch it, and I was like, this is a book. I could not remember what it was about. It did not remember Valentine's name, nothing. I had nothing. And it was basically like it's good, I promise. And yeah, she said no. So but I spent the next couple years just cutting it down to normal size and fixing all of the mistakes I made, and kind of like Becca, entering it into writers conference, pre-published writers conferences or contests, and kept pitching. And eventually, after a few years of that, I signed with my agent, and a few months later we had a contract with Tyndale for it. So it just released in January, and yeah, it's the story of Valentine and how Emperor Claudius II bans marriage, and Valentine continues to marry couples secretly and sort of becomes the hero of the people and also the most wanted man in the empire. And he has men looking for him to capture him, and he makes friends with the jailer's daughter, whose father stands to gain from his capture and imprisonment. So there's a lot of tension and suspense. And there's also, it's Christian fiction, so there's a faith element to it as well, where the characters are just kind of struggling with what what do we do with God when he answers some prayers and doesn't answer others? And can we still trust him? And then you have characters on the outside looking at the Christians at this time of Christian persecution and wondering how in the world can you believe in a God who you're being persecuted for, like just take the easy way out. And so there's a lot of questions that are just kind of wrestled through and that we still find ourselves wrestling with today. So even though it's an ancient fiction story, a lot of the struggles and questions that the characters are wrestling with are ones that we wrestle with today. So it's relatable in that way.
And you're also showing the beliefs at that time. There were many gods and one God,
Mhm.
showing the opposites of that. And then the relationship that Iris has with Valentine and how they meet and how
Mhm.
um and the secrecy behind him going and doing these weddings. It wasn't like he was going out into a chapel and doing them. He had to hide. So did all of that come from
Yeah.
the research?
A lot of it did. I mean, there's not a lot you can, look up the stories of Valentine and they're all pretty similar and they're all very short, like a couple sentences. And so there's no like historical documentation that he was a real person or anything like that. So pretty much I wrote this story under the under the mindset of if all these stories are true, these little snippets of story, like how would that have worked within what we know of the culture of Rome at the time and the history of Rome at the time? So I was kind of starting with the legends and then going to the history and the culture and everything we know and trying to fit them in and how would this have worked and kind of weaving both together with fiction.
And do you have enough for another book with the other 400 pages you wrote?
No, they should not have been in there in the first place. So it's totally, it's way better this way.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
So our next book is One Wrong Move. It's a new edge of your seat romantic suspense series. And it's has taunting riddles, a deadly string of heists, and two broken hearts trapped in the killer's game. And it's written by Danny Petrie. So Danny, you're up.
Okay, hi, I'm Danny Petrie. A little bit about me. I'm a wife of 32 years. We have two daughters, two son-in-laws, two grandsons, and a 200-pound Newfie whose favorite place to go is Starbucks for pup cups. So a lot of twos in our family. I was a very reluctant reader when I was young. And then on my 8th birthday, somebody gave me Murder on the Orient Express, and I fell in love. And I've been devouring books ever since. I started writing some poetry and ideas for short stories. And in high school, where I went, it was a very artsy high school. We had a really great theater program. A couple actors, Neil Patrick Harris and Freddie Prinze Jr., went through there. And they had a literary magazine. So I would write fictional short stories for the magazine. And I took some writing in college, but it wasn't until I had my kids that I set it aside. And then several years in, I got really sick. And when I was recovering, I started reading more again. I picked up Sue Grafton, A is for Alibi. I picked up Dee Henderson, who writes romantic suspense with a faith thread. And I thought that was just fabulous. And I just decided to start writing again. And so I started writing in notebooks when my kids were at soccer practice or lacrosse practice, and just going really slow. And my kids were raised in the library big time. They started at story time age and we homeschooled. So every week we went to the library and they got a ton of books. We knew all the librarians by first name. And as I was starting to write at these moments when I had time, I decided to research different facts. And I started getting all my research books at the library. And one day, one of the librarians asked me if I was a writer. And I said, well, I'm trying to be. And they were so encouraging of my writing journey. So I'm really grateful. I think they had a vital role in my writing career. So I finally finished a couple of manuscripts that will never see the light of day. And then I finished my third one and I decided to go to a writing conference. And I signed up too late to get agent and editor appointments. So I happened to wander into the spotlight session by Bethany House, which is part of Baker. And the editor mentioned they were looking for romantic suspense that was kind of out of the box. And I thought, well, mine has adventure in it. Maybe that counts. So at the end of it, somehow from almost the back row, I beelined up to the front and got to talk to him first. I think I maybe elbowed people out of the way. I hope I didn't, but I'm not sure how that happened. And I got up to him and told him what I wrote. And he said, okay, do you have a business card? And I said, yes, in my hotel room. And he said, do you have a one sheet, which I pitched with? And I said, yes, in my hotel room. So I was clearly not prepared. He was super kind and gave me his business card and said to send him 3 chapters. So the next day I was sitting in the lounge with several authors, and one came up after her editor appointment crying hysterically. Everybody was like, what was wrong? And she said, I had an appointment with the Dream Crusher. And we all went, who's the Dream Crusher? It was the editor I pitched to. I had no idea. So I came home and I got a nice rejection from one editor, actually at Tyndale. They didn't have a slot open in romantic suspense for like 3 years. I got an email saying I needed to learn how to write. And about 30 seconds later, I got an email from the Dream Crusher. And he actually wanted to see it. And so I sold my first novel. And now, 13 novels later, my book, One Wrong Move, has come out. It is about Christian McLeod, who was raised by con men, entered into a life of crime at a young age. And now, to make amends, he's become one of the nation's top security experts. When one of the galleries that he secured has a heist, he's put together with insurance investigator Andy Forster. And through taunting riddles and a string of heists, they are drawn deeper into the crimes, and the killer, who is bent on revenge, is after them. And if they would make one wrong move, they could both be dead. And the book is set in New Mexico. And the reason for New Mexico is while I was raised in Northern Virginia, I did live in New Mexico for high school, college. I met my husband there. We got married. We had our first home there. And I thought it would be really wonderful to set a series in the Southwest to bring attention to New Mexico. A lot of people aren't familiar with it. I have such good memories from there. I met my husband. He asked me to dance. That's how we met. He was a cowboy. He rode in the rodeo. We had a horse. And so I've taken a lot of that and infused it in One Wrong Move. It's been great to share all the things I love there, like the balloon fiesta, New Mexican recipes, which I adore New Mexican food. My characters go hiking at Bandelier, where I went hiking. I've been up in hot air balloons like my characters, and it's just been so much fun to kind of return to that place. I plan next year to do a book tour, and I will be stopping in New Mexico, which I'm really, really excited about. And so that was a big part of the inspiration of setting a family of 4 on a ranch outside of Santa Fe in a fictional town called Jeopardy Falls. And I love to create fictional towns. I did so in my first series, the Alaskan Courage series. And this series is now the second one with the fictional town. And I love it because I can create all the characters that live in the town, all the little shops. And I kind of built Jeopardy Falls after a town in Colorado called Durango. It has the same feel to it. And it's just been really fun watching the cowboys in the story, watching them eat my favorite recipes, and making the books special to me and hopefully to my readers. And the other inspiration behind it was I watched a show called Leverage years ago. And Leverage had ex-cons basically solving problems for other people. And I thought, I wonder what would happen if there were kids of cons and how they would handle it, and growing up, how they would turn from it and start to make amends for what they did. And my book has romance and suspense, but it also has a faith thread. And in this particular book, it has a lot of healing and the theme of hope. And I'm just really grateful for all the libraries that are already carrying it. I am grateful to be here today, and I want to thank you all for your time.
You also have, it's a family of siblings, which really is a nice tight unit, and you create that wonderful relationship between the two brothers and the sister. And then with Andy, the FBI, or she's no longer an FBI,
Mhm.
but she also kind of falls into that fold with her best friend. They're kind of
Yeah.
like a little family, so it's a feel-good book. Lot of
Yeah.
interesting, I'm going to say, central tension.
Yes, I would say so. Yes, there definitely is. It's, clean fiction, but yes, there's definitely sensual tension in the book. I tend to write that way with my characters, and, I hope it came out at a good level.
Yeah, no, it did. It was very good. Um, Now this is a series, so this is the first in the series. You're going to keep
Yes.
a Christian as the main character, or will you go on to new characters, or you'll keep some of the characters that are?
Sure. So what I will do is each sibling will have their own book. So the second book I'm working on now will be about the sister Riley, but the whole family will still appear in all the books and be kind of part of the secondary characters in the series.
And how many books do you think will be in the series besides just the three siblings?
Sure, there'll be 4 books in the series, so I will be introducing some new characters for the 4th book.
Okay, this is great. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, do you guys have any questions for each other? I don't see any questions from our audience. Do you have any thoughts or anything else that you'd like to say about your book or your writing program before we say goodbye? You're all good?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck, Danny, at PLA this week. And
Thank you.
to your publishers for letting us share your books and enjoy reading them quite a bit. And Becca, congratulations again to your book publishing yesterday. Yay!
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.